Have you ever noticed the moment you start healing, glowing or rising, suddenly people start acting weird? They mock your confidence, they question your peace, and sometimes they just turn against you. Let me tell you something real. It's not you they're mad at. It's their fear of not being able to control the new you. That's what triggers bullying. It's never about you. It's about them watching you rise while they stay stuck. You were never the problem. You just started evolving, and that threatened people who were too comfortable in their own stagnation. The truth is, when you begin to grow emotionally, mentally, spiritually, people around you who aren't growing start to feel small. And instead of choosing growth for themselves, they choose to project their pain on you. You got a new job? Suddenly they say, "You're lucky, not hardworking." You start dressing better, taking care of yourself, walking with that quiet confidence, and now you think you're better than everyone. No! You don't think you're better. They think you're better. And that comparison is eating them alive from the inside. You see, growth shines a spotlight on those who have chosen comfort over courage. It reminds them that they had the same 24 hours, but they didn't use it the way you did. You went to the gym when they slept in. You read books when they scrolled for hours. You spoke healing into yourself while they kept repeating their pain. And now that your results are showing, their bitterness is growing. Remember when you started setting boundaries? Saying no when you used to always say yes? That's when the shift started, didn't it? You weren't mean, you weren't rude, you just stopped being easy. And in doing so, you broke the version of you that existed to please everyone but yourself. That's the version they miss. Not because they loved her, but because she was convenient. Think about your school or college days. The moment you started speaking up more, participating more, winning awards or being noticed, people whispered. Some smiled to your face and mocked you behind your back. Why? Because you stepped into a space they always wanted to occupy, but never had the courage to claim. Your effort became their excuse to hate. Your shine became their shadow. Even in friendships, it's there. You start healing from a toxic past, maybe even leave a relationship that no longer served your peace. You begin glowing differently, laughing louder, living freer, and finding your worth. That same friend who used to support you now gives backhanded compliments like, "You've changed. Don't forget where you came from." Baby, you didn't forget. You just refuse to stay there, and that is what they cannot handle. In families, it cuts deeper. You chase dreams they were too scared to pursue. You break generational patterns. You speak up where silence was taught. You choose self-love where sacrifice was glorified. And now, you're rebellious? No. You're just no longer the version of you that settled for less. And for people who were raised to shrink, your expansion is offensive. And let's talk about the workplace. You stay late, you deliver excellence, you carry yourself with dignity, and suddenly you're trying too hard or acting like a boss. They don't see the tears you cried at home, the prayers you whispered before walking into meetings, or the silent battles you fought to be taken seriously. They just see the fruit and feel threatened because they never planted the seed. But here's what you need to understand. Their discomfort is not your responsibility. People will label your elevation as ego, your confidence as arrogance, and your self-respect as attitude. All because your growth confronts you outgrew the version of yourself that made them comfortable. And now you walk like you know who you are. You speak like your voice matters. You dress like you respect your own energy. That kind of power, it intimidates those who haven't found theirs. Don't shrink. Don't explain. Don't water down the fire just to keep others warm. Your growth is not an attack on anyone. It's a celebration of who you fought to become. And if that makes people feel small, maybe it's time they start looking within, because your light was never the problem. At some point, you stopped answering calls that drained you. You stopped saying yes just to keep the peace. You stopped allowing people to play with your time, your energy, your emotions like you were some game on standby. And that's when they turned on you. That's when the whispers began. That's when the bullying, the gaslighting, the sudden cold behavior started flooding in. Not because you wronged them, but because you were no longer easy to control. Before they could guilt you into doing things, you'd say yes with a smile while your soul screamed no. You'd cancel your plans, adjust your schedule, overextend yourself, all for people who never showed up when you needed them, and you thought that was love. You thought that was loyalty, but it wasn't. It was manipulation dressed in affection. And then something happened. Maybe it was one betrayal too many. Maybe it was the silence after you broke. Maybe it was that one moment when you cried in the dark and whispered to yourself, I deserve better than this. And in that exact moment, your spirit snapped out of their spell. You stopped apologizing for putting yourself first. And suddenly, the same people who called you sweet now call you selfish. Have you noticed how people react when you finally set boundaries? That best friend who always dumped her problems on you without ever asking how you were? She suddenly says, you're acting distant when you don't answer her trauma dump texts at 2 a.m. That relative who always made passive-aggressive comments about your life choices now says you're too sensitive when you call them out. They're not mad because you hurt them. They're mad because they can't manipulate you anymore. In relationships, it becomes even more obvious. You stopped begging to be loved. You stopped tolerating mixed signals, breadcrumb affection, and half-hearted efforts. You stopped waiting on people to realize your worth, and that shattered their illusion of power. They used to dangle attention in front of you like a carrot. Now you don't even blink when they pull away. That's when the insults come. You've changed. You're cold. You don't care. But what they really mean is you've evolved beyond their control. Even at work, when you used to say yes to every task just to be liked or seen, they praised you. But the day you asked for recognition, the day you spoke up in that meeting, the day you said, I deserve better pay, suddenly you were labeled difficult, demanding, or too ambitious. You weren't being difficult, You were being done with being used. Manipulators thrive in your silence. They feed off your inability to say no. And the day you reclaim that word, they lose their grip. That's when the attacks begin. Not because you're wrong, but because you're finally strong enough to resist their tactics. You stop over-explaining yourself. You stop feeling guilty for prioritizing your peace. You stop playing the role of the dependable one while no one was ever dependable for you. That's when they couldn't handle it. Because you, the once quiet, agreeable, peacekeeping version of you, chose self-worth over pleasing. And there is nothing more threatening to a manipulator than a woman who knows her worth. You didn't become rude, you became aware. You didn't become arrogant, you became empowered. You stopped allowing your kindness to be taken as weakness. And that terrified them. Because the power they held over you was never real. It was borrowed from your silence, your fear, your need to belong. But the day you woke up and decided to belong to yourself first, they lost access, they lost control. They lost the version of you who could be twisted, used, bent, and broken on command. And now, all they can do is try to break what they can no longer bend. You walk into a room and the energy shifts. Not because you're loud, not because you demand attention, but because your very presence is a reminder of everything they're afraid to become. You don't even have to say a word. Your confidence speaks, your grace speaks, your growth speaks. And for people who've been hiding behind masks of false confidence, your authenticity becomes uncomfortable. It's not that they hate you, they hate what you reveal about them. Your presence reflects back to them the choices they didn't make, the dreams they didn't chase, the strength they never activated. You become a walking mirror, not of who they are, but of who they could have been if they had dared to believe in themselves like you did. Think about it. You started taking care of yourself, dressing with intention, showing up with a glow that can't be bought. That glow isn't makeup. That glow is peace. It's healing, self-respect. It's nights of crying yourself to sleep and mornings of rising like nothing could break you. And suddenly, those around you start throwing shade. You're too much. You're showing off. But deep down, what they really mean is, how dare you shine when I'm still stuck in the dark? In school, at work, even in your own family, your light doesn't just brighten the room, it exposes the shadows. You speak truth without apology, and it makes the liars twitch. You pursue excellence, and it makes the lazy uncomfortable. You stand tall in rooms designed to shrink you, and suddenly, the people who used to love you when you were small can't stand you when you've grown tall. They want you to dim your light, so theirs doesn't feel dull. But baby, you weren't born to be a candle. You were born to be the sun. You don't have to compete, you just exist. And that's the threat. You're not trying to make anyone look bad. You just look so damn good doing what they never had the courage to try. And that breeds silent envy. Ever had that coworker who smiles in meetings but cuts you with compliments like, You're always so perfect, huh? Or the friend who starts copying your style but suddenly stops talking to you? It's not random. It's insecurity wearing a mask. Because they watched you rebuild yourself from scratch. They watched you level up silently while they stayed still. Now your presence, your words, your posture, it all whispers a truth they're too afraid to hear. You didn't wait to be chosen. You chose yourself. And that's the difference. Most people are waiting for permission, waiting for validation, waiting for applause. But you gave yourself all three. And because you did, they feel exposed. Their excuses, their laziness, their fear, it all becomes louder when you walk in, owning who you are. Even your silence makes noise. You could be minding your business, focused on your own growth, and someone will still find a way to feel threatened. That's not your problem. That's their wound speaking. You are not arrogant. You are aware. You are not intimidating. They are intimidated. There is a difference. Because the moment you started loving yourself out loud, refusing to shrink, choosing joy, protecting your peace, and standing in your power, they couldn't hide anymore. You didn't outshine them, you just stopped hiding your own light. And the world noticed, so did they. And suddenly, your existence became a disruption to their comfort. You didn't ask for attention, but when you rise unapologetically, it commands it. And people who've been living small feel exposed, not because of anything you said, but simply because of everything you've become. They don't really hate you. They hate that you're seen. They hate that when you speak, people listen. That when you walk into a room, heads turn, energy shifts and conversations pause for just a second. That when you post something, people stop scrolling. Because the truth is, they crave the very spotlight you never even asked for. You weren't chasing attention, you were chasing purpose. You were minding your own growth, healing quietly, evolving in silence. And while you were doing the inner work, they were watching you from a distance, secretly comparing, secretly counting your likes, secretly wishing they had the same kind of magnetic pull you carry. But instead of asking how you got there, they choose to resent you for it. You ever notice how the moment you start to glow, suddenly someone has a problem? The moment people start complimenting your progress, that friend starts throwing sarcastic comments. Wow, you think you're better than everyone now? No. You don't think you're better. You just know you're not the version of yourself they use to manipulate, control, or pity. And that confidence, that evolution, it makes them itch. Because they want the applause you didn't beg for. They want the recognition you earned through scars, sacrifice, and soul work. In school, you stayed consistent. You showed up, did the work, stayed up late while others partied. You put your head down while they laughed at you. And then one day, when the awards came, when the praise poured in, when teachers called your name, suddenly they whispered, "She's the teacher's pet." No, you were just focused. But people will always criticize the results of what they didn't have the discipline to do themselves. At work, it's the same game. So you didn't gossip, you didn't play politics. You just delivered results. And now management sees your value, colleagues praise your reliability, and your name keeps coming up in rooms you didn't even step into. And just like that, the office bully starts acting cold. Because your presence threatens the hierarchy they built with manipulation instead of merit. You earned your attention, but they think they're entitled to it. Even in your own circle, the ones closest to you can't handle your shine. You start your own business, people support. You lose weight, people cheer. You start speaking boldly, people are inspired. And now suddenly someone who was once close says, "You've changed." They say it like it's a flaw, but what they really mean is, you're now being noticed for the very things they try to suppress in you. Because here's the truth no one tells you. Some people only liked you when you were good, silent, when you were invisible, when your greatness was still hiding in the shadows. Because back then, your existence didn't threaten theirs. But now, you've found your voice, your power, your light. And suddenly, your spotlight feels like a theft to them. But how can it be theft when you built it yourself? You took your pain and turned it into passion. You took your insecurity and turned it into influence. You weren't born with a stage. You carved one out of every moment you weren't chosen. And now that you're finally being seen, they want to rewrite your story as if you just got lucky. No, you didn't get lucky. You got hungry. You didn't ask for attention, you earned it with every step you took when no one was clapping. People who truly see your journey will clap for you without feeling smaller. But the ones who only watched to compare will always hate the light that you didn't dim. Because when you glow effortlessly, their forced energy starts to flicker. And rather than fix their flame, they'll try to snuff out yours. Not because it's too bright, but because it reminds them they could have been shining too. They don't bully you because you're broken. They bully you because you're whole. You started loving yourself and that shook something in them. Because for the first time, you stopped seeking permission to feel worthy. You stopped begging for validation. You looked in the mirror and said, "I am enough," and actually believed it. And for some people, self-love is more offensive than arrogance, because it's rooted in truth, not performance. You don't hate yourself out loud anymore. You're not fishing for compliments. You're not shrinking just to make others comfortable. You're walking into spaces with your head held high, your back straight, and a calm glow that says, "I know who I am now." And that kind of power terrifies people who only know how to survive through approval. They've spent years trying to love themselves by being what others wanted. And here you are, loving yourself simply for being you. That's a threat to their entire way of existing. Think about it. You used to apologize for taking up space. Now you walk like you own the floor. You used to hide behind filters. Now you post that bare face like it's a crown. You used to twist yourself into silence just to be accepted. Now your voice is loud, proud, and unapologetically raw. And suddenly the people who once praised your humility now call you too much. But what they really mean is, you're not dependent on them anymore. you've become emotionally independent. And to the insecure, that's rebellion. At work, you speak your mind, not rudely, just clearly. You don't let people overstep your boundaries. You say no without guilt. And they start whispering, "She's so difficult now." No, you're just no longer easy to control. You know your worth. And you're done handing out discounts to people who never deserved your loyalty in the first place. You love yourself enough to stop tolerating disrespect. And that kind of clarity, it makes manipulators panic. In relationships, you stop chasing, you stop begging for attention, you no longer accept bare minimum love because you know you're not a second option. You walk away from almost and maybes, and suddenly the ones who had power over your heart start calling you cold. But darling, you're not cold. You're clear. You don't need to be chosen anymore because you already chose you. And that unshakable inner love, that's something people who rely on others for identity will never understand. Even in friendships, you stopped entertaining one-sided loyalty. You stopped overgiving. You stopped breaking yourself just to keep others whole. And they call you selfish. But here's the truth. You were never selfish. You were just starved for love. And now that you've finally fed yourself, they're uncomfortable that you're not starving anymore. You gave them pieces of you for so long that they mistook it for permanent access. But now your love is expensive. Now your time is sacred. Now your peace is non-negotiable. You love your scars. You love your story. You love your softness and your strength. And that makes you magnetic in a world full of people trying to fit into someone else's mold. You're not trying to be better than anyone. You're just finally being good to yourself. But for some, that's the deepest betrayal. Because your self-love is a reminder of the love they keep denying themselves. They can't handle it. Not because there's something wrong with you, but because there's something unhealed in them. You're walking proof that healing is possible, that wholeness is available, that love doesn't have to be begged for. It can be grown from within. And that truth, it scares them. Because if you can love yourself without their validation, it means they could have too. You ever wonder why some people suddenly turn against you? Out of nowhere. Why someone who once praised your presence now finds every reason to discredit your name? It's not always about what you did, it's about what you finally saw. Sometimes it's not betrayal, it's revelation. God didn't punish you with their hate. He blessed you with the truth. He removed their mask, and in that raw unveiling, you saw them for who they truly were. You saw that the friend who always cheered you on only did so when you were broken. Because your healing meant they could no longer play the hero in your story. They didn't want your success. They wanted your struggle. Because as long as you needed saving, they felt powerful. But once God lifted the veil, you realized their love was conditional, built on the foundation of your weakness. And the moment you stood on your own, they disappeared like smoke in sunlight. Think back to that relationship, the one where you thought you met your soulmate. The compliments, the attention, The sweet nothings whispered like poetry. But slowly, God began to show you signs. Not dramatic ones at first, just small shifts. A pattern in their silence. The way they laughed at your dreams. The way your success made them shrink. And you tried to ignore it. You tried to pray it away. But then came that one moment, so clear, so undeniable, that it shattered every illusion. You realized they didn't love you. They loved the version of you that stayed small, confused, dependent. And when you outgrew that version, the mask slipped. Sometimes at work, it's the colleague who claps when you're average, but suddenly criticizes when you excel. The one who smiles in the meeting, but secretly sabotages your name behind closed doors. You thought they were your ally, your mentor, even your friend. But God heard conversations you didn't. He saw intentions you couldn't. And one day, through a slip of the tongue, an exposed email, a conversation that wasn't meant for your ears, you saw it. The real face, the envy, the manipulation, and it hurt. Because you didn't want to believe it. But understand this, God never exposes a lie to break you. He does it to free you. Even in family, the truth shows up. That cousin who always joked about your weight, that aunt who never missed a chance to compare you, that sibling who smiled when you failed and sulked when you won. You were loyal to the bond, to the blood, but they were loyal to your silence. The moment you stopped laughing at their cruelty, the moment you set boundaries and chose your peace, you saw their true colors. And what's wild is, they say you changed, but no, you just stopped playing blind. You started walking in truth, and that truth lit up every shadow they were hiding in. And the pain isn't that they wore a mask. The pain is that you loved the mask. You believed in it. You defended it. You would have bled to protect what you thought was real. But that's why God stepped in. Because love rooted in illusion is a prison. And He didn't create you. You were never meant to stay blind to people's true nature. You were never meant to keep shrinking just to be loved. And you were never created to stay silent in rooms where your soul is being crushed just so someone else could feel tall. The moment you chose yourself, the world revealed who was real and who was just wearing a costume. And yes, it hurt. Yes, it shattered something deep inside. But sometimes the breaking is where the light finally gets in. Let them talk. Let them twist your name. Let them spread lies like confetti. They are loud because your silence is louder. They're loud because your growth screams through every room you walk in. Because deep down, they know they can't reach you anymore. And that burns. But your job is not to explain your elevation to people committed to misunderstanding your journey. You don't owe anyone an apology for waking up, for choosing peace over chaos, for choosing depth over drama. You don't owe an explanation for evolving. You are not a tree. If you don't like where you are, move. Those words are real, powerful, true. But let me say something deeper. You are not a mirror. You don't have to reflect anyone's insecurities just to make them feel whole. You don't have to carry the emotional weight of people who chose not to heal. You don't have to play small just so someone else can feel big in your presence. If your light exposes their darkness, that's their battle, not yours. Never dim your light because others are blinded by it. Some people hate you not because of what you've done, but because they see in you what they buried in themselves. Maybe they started bullying you because you glowed different, because you refused to gossip, because you refused to fake smile, because you finally said, no, I deserve better. And in that moment, you shifted. You became unavailable for disrespect, unavailable for games, unavailable for manipulation. And they lost access to your softness, the version of you they could use. That's why they're bitter. That's why they hate. Because you are the proof that a woman or a man can heal, rise, love themselves, and walk away from the noise without clapping back. Now that's power. You want a famous line to live by? Here it is. Lions don't lose sleep over the opinions of sheep. Let them talk. You've got kingdoms to build. You've got dreams to breathe life into. You've got peace to protect, boundaries to uphold, and a soul too divine to waste on people who treat your loyalty like it's disposable. You are not built to break. You are built to burn bright. And every scar, every betrayal, every fake friend, every masked lover was part of the blueprint that made you unshakable. Walk tall, eyes up, shoulders back. When they come for you, smile. Because the same ones trying to tear you down watched you rise. And deep down they know they can't unsee the truth anymore. They can't unknow your strength. They can't undo your glow. You were never the villain in their story. You were just the mirror. The one who showed them what healing, confidence, and real love for self actually looks like. And not everyone can handle the reflection. So keep walking. Let your silence speak volumes. Let your growth make noise. Let your boundaries be louder than your explanations. Because the right people will never be intimidated by your strength. They will be inspired by it. The right people will clap for your evolution, not punish you for it. And when they ask, why did they stop bullying you? Tell them, because I stopped breaking myself to be liked. You're not too much. You're just finally enough for you. Let them deal with that truth. Let them choke on the silence of a soul that no longer needs them to breathe. And while they gossip, you glow. While they hate, you heal. And while they fall into the noise, you rise into your calling. Because you're not just surviving anymore, you're becoming. And nothing terrifies small minds more than a soul that refuses to shrink.